Okay, so this is going to be the second part of the Legacy of Kain Iceberg. I'm going to be trying to do it slightly differently, and I know that I missed, I think, two entries on the previous iceberg, so I'm going to be including them in this video. And there are going to be some entries that go a lot smaller or might be included in other entries just due to the fact that they coincide with them a lot, but it's going to be on like a case by case basis. I will be sourcing images from thelostworlds.net and Dark Chronicle, as well as information from those websites and the Legacy of Kain wiki. And hopefully, if anything else, I'll remember to credit it the right way. Soul Reaver was two-thirds of the intended game. Soul Reaver is well known for its cut content, its ultra plot line, with the final game ending with Kain goading Raziel to follow him into the past. But the game would have originally featured a few more bosses, Terrell the priestess, more confrontations with Kain, areas corresponding to those characters and fights. There would have been a second half of the Silence Cathedral with an ending involving wiping out the vampires in Nosgoth. And due to time, budget, and I think also like programming issues, a lot of the game was cut and altered. TheLostWorlds.net and Raina Audrin's YouTube channels give an amazing amount of insight and documentation to the cut content, as well as the more recently revealed alpha builds of the game that actually include much of the content that was shown off and cut from the game before release. So this entry is about the Chronoplast premonition of the Mountain Retreat confrontation, and at the end of Soul Reaver, um, Raziel travels through the Chronoplast to find and confront Kain for the final time. Before ending up at the final chamber, though, he can approach and interact with some portals that line the path. Each of these portals shows a moment in time, from the moment of Raziel's resurrection to having the Soul Reaver broken over him, finding his coffins and his brother's coffins in the Tomb of the Seraphan. One of the visions in particular shows Raziel facing off against Kain in a room with Kain's clan symbol on the ground. In the final game, when Raziel gets to the Chronoplast chamber, him and Kain have a confrontation and they go through time. The specific event shown in that vision doesn't actually happen. In the alpha versions of the game, Raziel was going to actually confront Kain in his mountain retreat and kill him to obtain the Shift at Will glyph power and to get the Kain Reaver that will be mentioned later and get the ending where he kills all the vampires using the sound pipes at the Silence Cathedral. Now, it's notable that in that specific scene, Raziel comments,
My mind reels with conflict. Does Kain await me moments from now, or in some century yet to come?
Soul Reaver 1 is known for its plethora of cut content and altered storyline, and it's interesting knowing the context behind the vision itself, what it means for the story as it did transpire, and how it could have transpired. Soul Reaver 1, Soul Reaver 2, and Defiance contain Reaver Forges or Reaver upgrades. But this entry could be about a couple different things. There are forges that exist in the series, but it could also be referencing the fact that many Reaver Forges were cut from each game. Soul Reaver 1 was known to have featured many Reavers and Reaver Forges before release, but in the final game only features the Fire Forge and Fire Reaver with having actual abilities. The rest of the Reavers are accessible on PC without any functionality. And the Kain and Ariel Reavers, which will be talked about later, do appear in the game in the visions and with cheat codes that you can type in, but they are like a skin, pretty much. Soul Reaver 2 does have a couple different forges and Reaver upgrades, but there's a notable cut Spirit Reaver, which was also supposed to appear in Soul Reaver 1, but you can only find the destroyed ruins of the forge in one of the drowned watery areas in one of the future timelines. The Spirit Reaver would actually be later on acquired after Raziel absorbs Ariel into it, like the Soul Reaver 1 Chronoplast vision showed him without him having to like strike her down. But the entry involving Ariel in the Forge, it most likely is relevant to this in that she would only be able to become the Spirit Reaver by interacting with Raziel, and when we see the vision, she is nowhere near the pillars, which she is bound to since her murder. So she would have to somehow get away from the pillars or appear somewhere else. And I'm just going to include that entry right here because that's pretty much all there is to it. Why was she able to move while she was bound to the pillars? I'm not really sure. Soul Reaver 1, you can't really tell what it is, but in Soul Reaver 2, I mean, Defiance, it's part of the entire story to purify the Soul Reaver and pass that on to Kain so that he could damage the Elder God. The Pillars of Nosgoth game concept is pretty much the original documentation and concept of the original Blood Omen by Dennis Dyack. Dennis Dyack and Ken McCullough came up with the details of the story, and Ken wrote the scripts for the game, and I think like weapon descriptions, what Kain says. Um, Kain was it was going to be slightly different, with ideas scaled back to be realistic, but I don't really know a ton about it, but Dark Chronicle has a really good article on it that gives some amount of insight into it and also a timeline for the up to the game's release and development, which I will link somewhere below. Okay, so the Soul Reaver 1 2020 alpha leak is referring to the fact that after literally decades of people seeking out the cut content from Soul Reaver since release, some alpha versions of the game had gotten into the hands of, I believe, and I'm going to try to read the thanks that Ben Lincoln gives on the LostWorlds.net so that I make sure I don't not include anybody out of accident. But Raina Audrin, Kevin Chat Mojo, Ben Lincoln, and I believe like the Ancients Den um, somehow got these alpha versions in their hands and then documented a ton of the cut content from the game, put it on YouTube and on their websites, which I will link. But I want to just specifically state the names that Ben Lincoln thanks in his blurb on his website so that I don't leave anybody out, because I'm not very informed as to exactly how these got found. But Ghostblade, Kevin Chat Majo, Raina Audrin, Aesir Hod, Avum, Bazielum, Mama Robotnik, Eogan Driver, cut into 14 pieces, Amy Hennig, Daniel Kabuko, Seth Karras, Dark Lore, the Gaming Intelligence Agency, Andrew Vestal and Chris Johnston slash GameSpot, Chris Slate slash PSM, PlayStation Magazine, Peter Kwan, and everyone who helped Soul Reaver. If I have missed something, I do apologize. DLC for the 2010 game Lara Croft and the Guardian of Light featured Kain and Raziel as character swaps for Laura and Totek, with cut-up dialogue from the original series serving as the story dialogue. I also think it's incredibly weird that it's not even like Tomb Raider; it's Lara Croft and the Guardian of Light. The "Come to Me, My Undead Son" anachronism. Um, when Mortanius telepathically says it to Kain after Vorador and Mobius die in Blood Omen 1. And in Defiance, Raziel encounters Mortanius and he's like says it, and then finds Mobius in Vorador's mansion, like seemingly before Vorador's execution. Amy Hennig has said that the scene was kind of a mistake due to story shuffling near the end, and because it's kind of described that way in the games, I kind of feel like that works if you got to take notice of it. Otherwise, I don't think it's really worth getting bent over a little goof like that. The Sound Pipes and Silence Cathedral Pinnacle entry refers to the scrapped ending for Soul Reaver 1, where Raziel, after killing Kain, would go back to the Silence Cathedral, work his way up it, do some puzzles, probably block puzzles, and by unleashing a giant sonic attack, would kill off all the vampires in Nosgoth. And you can still hear this scrapped ending in the audio files that made it into the final game. So the Elder Gods cut of Raziel's souls. Raziel devours souls, returning them to the Wheel of Fate that all souls go back to upon death to be reborn. The Elder God is seemingly a parasite that's latched onto the wheel, feeding off of the souls. The entry presumably asks of the exact mechanics and how much of soul or soul energy the Elder God siphons off to feed on. As briefly mentioned in part 1, Kain and Vordor have a tenuous alliance in Blood Omen 2. Um, More than likely, this is done to highlight, the differences in Kain's very cruel and brash nature and how Vordor has changed, which will be mentioned in a later entry. Um, and it's not really made explicitly clear what kind of has them so tense against each other, because it's a very tense alliance against the Seraphan Lord, the Hilden. Mobius's corruption was retroactive, is referring to a theory that I've only seen on Reddit, shown right here, that says Mobius may have been corrupted chronologically before the rest of the Guardians of the Pillars due to his status as the Time Guardian. Ariel's murder and Nuptraptor's psychic attack corrupted the rest of the Guardians at one specific point in time, alongside the physical manifestation of the corruption on the Pillars themselves. It could possibly explain his madness, his scheming, the hatred of vampires, and servitude to the Elder God, but I'm not really sure how well that kind of theory tracks. Kain has free will after the heart tear. The idea being that after Kain dies at the hands of Raziel, when he rips the heart of darkness out of Kain to put it back in Janos under the influence of the Hilden, Kain achieves free will and is no longer bound by the structure of preordained destiny laid out before everyone in Nosgoth. I don't really think this is accurate, as Raziel is supposed to be the only one who can deliberately act with some sort of free will in the series, being able to change the path of destiny in specific paradoxical moments. I think the idea of Kain and William the Just coming to blows with Soul Reavers allowed for a paradox moment to happen, but I don't believe Kain genuinely has free will, just because of the heart being gone. Maybe the Scion of Balance identity that Kain has plays some role in that, but I would think that the specific moment of the heart tear wouldn't really impact it all that much. The woman in Vordor's portrait. There is a painting in Vordor's mansion visible behind him in Blood Omen and in Defiance that portrays a woman. Originally, this woman didn't really have any backstory or significance at either point in game's development, but Daniel Kabuko said that the painting was sort of a riff of an open-ended idea wherein the woman was possibly a lost love, a powerful sorceress, as a part of Vordor's backstory to add depth to his character and lore. The Priestess and the Undercity were two things cut from the original release of Soul Reaver. The Undercity would have been found in the Human Citadel area and would have housed vampires and vampire worshippers, and the Priestess herself, who is a vampire worshipping woman with magical powers. She's seen in the Top Cow comic book, and her voice lines can still be listened to in the game itself. And when the alpha came out, her design drastically differed from what was presented in concept art and the comic book. But after her death, you get the possession ability, or you originally planned to get the possession ability. And there's a very good video available on Reyna Audren's channel that shows her, the area you would have fought her, and the entire Undercity itself. The sprites entry, I'm not really sure if it's referring to something in particular, but it could be just referring to the Blood Omen sprites, which you can get online, as far as I know. The Death's Head mask is like a magical mask worn by Mortanius. In Blood Omen 1, it just seems to be like his face, and he's a very gaunt, skeletal-looking person. But in Defiance, where he looks more humanoid, it's just like a filter overlaid over his face that makes him look more. It evokes death-like imagery, so it kind of fits. Kain traveled forward in time after Raziel's execution refers to the idea that after Raziel was executed and the Depending on the specific source, 500 to 1,000 year gap between execution and resurrection. That Kain had simply just went to the chronoplast and traveled forward in time. It's kind of hinted at by some of the brothers, seeming to indicate that Kain has been gone for a while and has only recently given them any sort of indication of his machinations. And it wouldn't really make sense for Kain to just do something for 500 to 1,000 years ruling a decayed empire when we know that he has specific plans for the past in Nosgoth. He probably just knows that Raziel is key. He has to travel back in time with him to fill out their destiny, and he finds the moments after Raziel's execution and his clan being killed to be inconsequential. The smokestack was an area cut from Soul Reaver 1. It would have been Tyrell and his clan's territory. It's served plot wise to drown the sun in smoke so that the vampires would have more free reign over Nosgoth. And it does appear in the intro FMV to Soul Reaver, but it really isn't mentioned anywhere else. It was cut from the game, and it would have featured a lot of like fire and lava that would have served as obstacles to Raziel. The Ariel and Kain Reavers are the Spirit and Amplified Soul Reaver, respectively, and they stem from the Chronoplast visions from Soul Reaver 1. The Ariel Reaver's name comes from the vision where Raziel sees himself striking Ariel down, and the Reaver becomes gold. But that is later retconned to be the Spirit Reaver in Defiance in that moment in particular. The Kain Reaver is shown in the vision looking out over the balcony with black and red color scheme, thought to be because of Raziel confronting, killing, and absorbing Kain into the Reaver. Kain was originally blonde in the FMV intro of Blood Omen. Originally, the ambush and Kain's murder would not have been playable, but portrayed in a cutscene. And the video has never been released publicly, but it can be seen in pre-release materials like an ad and was shown in the bonus content of Defiance. Okay, so that was part 2 of the Legacy of Kain Iceberg. Hope it was somewhat of higher quality than the last one and that you enjoyed it. And any mistakes I made, feel free to correct. And I hope I credited everybody right, and I appreciate it.